Mercury News. I agree with that description if you remove the ET from asset. Max, should Curry have said this about our president?
Absolutely. I mean, what he said was mild in general. Look, we're not at the point yet where you have to just praise dear leader, right? It's still a free country. And particularly, I understand the reaction of respect for the office of the president. But when the office of the president is debased by a holder of that office who makes ad hominem attacks, who insults people publicly on Twitter and other areas, who makes up facts or is else deluded, who uses coarse language and who coarsens public discourse, then I think it's not only to be anticipated, but appropriate that in turn, when that person is discussed, they are discussed in similar language by many and with similar contempt. Yes, in fact, I think Curry does not the one with explaining to do. I believe it's the owner who made the comments. And he's explained himself since then, by the way.
I disagree with you. I disagree with you. And it said, listen, you know, we all know how most of us feel about the behavior we've seen from our president. We know that we don't like it in a lot of situations. We get that. But there is something to be said for respect in the office. Even if we believe that person in office doesn't display or disseminate the level of respect and decorum we think should come attached to that position. Two wrongs don't make a right. And the fact of the matter is that you got a lot of guys that are willing to speak up now. And what disgusts me about it is that I didn't hear those voices prior to the election. I'm going to repeat what I've said on many, many occasions, Max. You have a black community that obviously, you know, by and large, did not want him in office. They were proponents for Hillary. Yet 2 million less of our community went out and voted for her that voted for Barack Obama. We heard our president talking about building a wall. And supposedly, Latinos the world over were supposed to be abhorred by such things that there's no way on earth that they would support him, yet 29% of them came out and voted for him. All I'm saying by bringing that up is that we had an opportunity because of this country that we live in, as great as this country is and what we stand for, we had an opportunity to address it in the most profound manner possible by going to the polls, making sure our voices were heard, or speaking out in the process and trying to influence the election to the best of our ability. I don't recall Steph Curry's voice being heard at that particular time. I don't recall a lot of these guys who are willing to blow V8 now that others have come before them willing to speak out. Now it's safe for them to speak. But before, when they had an opportunity to make a difference, a profound difference because of the impact that they could potentially have, they passed the buck. So I don't really want to hear.
Why is it safe now, Stephen A? I understand. I think it's a really good point you're making.
I didn't say it's safe now.
But why, I don't understand why is it safe now. It was safe then before he was president. Now it's more dangerous.
I don't mean it's safe now. What I'm saying is those who want to speak out, when somebody comes before you and sort of lays down the carpet for you to follow, sometimes it's easier for those to follow rather than lead. And I'm saying to you that there are a plethora of individuals who could have spoken before, and their opinions would have been far more profound, and the results of their actions would have been far more profound. So on that level, I have a problem with it. And all I'm saying is at the end of the day, based on what we're seeing, a legitimate argument could be made that our president might give an abundance of people an opportunity and a license to come at him with incendiary rhetoric, with irresponsible language, and beyond. But it's our responsibility to not take that bait and to show what you alluded to in the previous segment when we were talking about morals and we were talking about being upstanding and we were talking about striving to be as righteous as we can possibly be and showing the way. I heard Steve Kerr speak very eloquently about Donald Trump. I heard Greg Popovich speak very eloquently about Donald Trump. I didn't hear names. I didn't hear insults. I heard people who spoke intelligently and eloquently against the president based on what they saw and what it made them feel. That is what we support and condone and encourage
You're talking
as
about
American citizens, not the insults and engaging in irresponsible rhetoric, because it makes us no better than some folks are willing to say that he is.
I don't think it's irresponsible rhetoric, but I do agree with your basic appeal to our better angels. When they go low, we go high, right? Like, that's the idea. And by we, I mean civilized people. But I would say that if you follow the logic, and what you're talking about is an optimal response. Steph Curry's response may have been suboptimal, but not necessarily bad. And to point out how, what we're really saying is that the rest of civil society should be held to a much higher standard than the president. And if the president's behavior is so debasing the office that his coarse way of communicating and other things also about his behavior so far suggests that or demands, according to you, that people in every other walk of life elevate above that standard of behavior, that kind of points out the real urgent need to be very critical of the president, which Steph Curry's doing. And by the way, he didn't curse him out or anything. He made a little slick little pun.
We know that. That's how we introduced the subject. But I need you to listen to the point that I'm about to make, because I want your response to it. But I need you to hear where I'm coming from with this. I am of the belief that we have too many of these athletes that care more about their money than their platforms. And that's why you see them waiting in order to speak and being a bit reticent, because it's almost like, you know, seeing where the tea leaves fall or whatever. But to address your specific point, which is where I want your response to, is this, Max. You talked about basically us asking ourselves as American citizens to hold a higher standard than the president. I would say to you, I respectfully disagree with that. I don't think that the president is not being asked to hold a higher standard, or not being asked. I don't think that we're asking for the president to be held to a lower standard. I think we have the same demands of a president. This president just doesn't seem to care. That is entirely different than accusing the American people of not asking for it. So when we sit in there and we talk about a professional athlete or whatever the case may be, all I'm simply saying is that just because he might behave in a way that Max Kellerman finds absolutely atrocious, along with tens of millions of other people, I'm saying you can look at him and say he's not doing it, but you can also recognize he's not doing something he should be doing, while also mandating that we maintain and continue to do what we're supposed to do as American citizens. He's on a 4 to 8 year lease, Max. This is the greatest country in the world. We've overcome bad before. Shorter. We'll overcome it again.
Yeah, or shorter. He may not last the 4 years in office, given conflicts of interest in business, et cetera, potentially. Unreleased tax returns, the apparent exact parallel with Putin's preferred global strategy, et cetera. So, you know, time will tell. But here's the problem with what you said, Stephen A. When you say it's not that he's not being asked to comport himself at a higher level, he's just failing to do it. And that shows up in the polls, by the way, very unpopular right now, the most unpopular in history at this point in his term. But he said so many disqualifying things that coarsened the public dialogue in the campaign that we'd never heard before, and yet the electorate did not hold him to that standard. As you said, he doesn't seem to care. Neither did the people who voted for him. Certainly, in their view, it didn't disqualify him from their vote. But the Republican Congress doesn't seem to care. 99% of them are voting with him and going along with whatever he wants. That's not being held to a higher level.
Hold on. What I'm saying is this. What I'm saying, that's where I'm going. I'm going back to Steph Curry. The issue is Steph Curry. It's not him. We understand where you stand with all of that, Max. We get that. But the point is that if you are a marquee professional athlete, not just representing you and your name, but that of the Golden State Warriors, and there may be some members of their organization who don't feel that way. The NBA, there may be some members of the brand who don't feel that way. When you are a marquee name, you don't just represent yourself. You represent everybody else. So you do have an obligation to be sensitive to all of that and watch yourself. That's the issue, not Trump's politics and all of that other stuff. That's the issue.
I appreciate that point that Steph, as a public-facing person and someone with influence, particularly with children, should hold himself to a high standard in spite of the standard that the president may hold himself to.
Max, we got to leave it there. Let's step aside from the political realm, and I want to direct this conversation into more of the business aspects. Stephen A., you brought up dollars and how this could potentially affect Steph Curry's bottom line. So back in 2015, Nike missed a chance to lure Steph Curry away from Under Armour, but in the end, Curry stayed with the company that gave him his first deal. Last month, the Under Armour stock dropped 25%, and their CFO stepped down. Now he's publicly disagreeing with the CEO over Trump. Stephen A., has he hurt his stock?
Well, when you say he hurt his stock, this is what we need to understand, and this is why I wanted to broach this subject, guys. Steph Curry is a superstar. Great guy, great basketball ambassador, babyface assassin, the greatest shooter I have ever seen, and straight box office. And a great guy, great family, everything. That much we know. What we need to understand, however, is that Kevin Durant's arrival may have hurt him because Kevin Durant represents Nike. Under Armour obviously has had some issues. Stock has fallen, etc. They've got some problems they need to address. Well, what's the issue with that? If Kevin Durant and Steph Curry are both champions on the same team, really displaying the same or similar kind of results, Kevin Durant has the benefit of Nike as a backdrop because they are not in such trouble. Whereas as Steph Curry, who, by the way, has a vested interest in Under Armour, by the way, having their stock plummet the way that it did, it might compromise them. The very success of Golden State means the success of Kevin Durant. It's why Jay-Z played such an integral role in influencing Kevin Durant to decide on going to Golden State. Because if you become a champion while also representing Nike, who knows what's going to come your way? It's going to be very advantageous for you, and as a result could potentially compromise the success of Steph Curry, who's entering a contract year along with Durant. He's going to get max dollars, of course. He's going to get what he wants. But I'm saying it can alter things in a way that people are not considering, and it makes you pay attention to what's going on in Golden State. Because don't always assume that those two are going to always be teammates. It's entirely plausible that it might not be in Steph Curry's best interest to continue that way. You never know.
Yeah, that's a point well taken, Stephen A. Remember when Kevin Durant's free agency was coming up, there was a lot of speculation that he could wind up with the Wizards because they were near where Under Armour was headquartered, and there was some thought that maybe he'd go with Under Armour. Because of the salary structure of the NBA, it's a league with a salary cap and a max contract, even though that can be played with a little bit, not only because of bird rights, but because of pending CBAs, which raise the max contract. Nevertheless, players can figure out and map to the dollar what they're going to be paid. And every team would line up to give Steph Curry or Kevin Durant max money. So they know that money is kind of set in stone. Where they can really make a difference is in endorsements, particularly with shoe companies, which sometimes exceed the value of their NBA contract. In that sense, the shoe company becomes their primary employer, at least their biggest, they pay the most. And so those kind of considerations are real, but I also think, branding issues aside, maybe Under Armour wants the best guy on the team to be their guy, and the same thing with Nike. Branding issues aside, because of bird rights and because of the money deals with the shoe companies, if this team wins together especially, there's no reason for them to break up. In other words, the business interests, I think, by and large, also suggest that the team stays together should they have success, and they're favored to do so.
Well, the operative words that you use there is that you think. We don't know, and that makes it very, very intriguing, because when I brought up that subject over a couple of months ago, that was one of the reasons why. We don't know. Once you're a champion, particularly if they win this year, and Steph Curry is a two-time champion, having established himself as a two-time league MVP, a two-time champion, the greatest shooter in basketball, I am in no way saying that he'll leave Golden State or whatever the case may be. But if you're the Golden State Warriors and you could still win championships and compete for championships without having to worry about compromising your bottom line because you're winning. You're still going to have box office attractions. You're still going to compete for championships, et cetera, et cetera. It might be in your best interest to reach the conclusion that you don't need to keep all three or all four if you want to include Draymond Green. You might have to, you might want to make that choice. I can't fathom that they would want to get rid of any of them for years to come. But you just never know, and you never know what one of those two are going to want to do, because we do understand that they get influenced by things that by institutions who represent them. In the case of Nike or Under Armour, you never know what kind of influence they could wield in terms of trying to manipulate where somebody goes once they have a championship. It could get very interesting this summer.
No question. And Stephen A., let's not forget, this isn't a two-horse race with a Nike and Under Armour. There's also this little company called Adidas on the come-up. Just ask James Harden about
But Nike
that
trumps
one.
everybody.
No,
Nike trumps
they're
everybody.
creeping up, though.
Adidas is rising because of Harden.
Adidas is rising, no question.
Because of Harden, yes.
Sneakers, my specialty. Let's leave it there, guys. When we come back, after lighting up NFL defenses all season, Kyle Shanahan and the Falcons offense hit a wall in the second half of the Super Bowl. So should the Niners be concerned about their new head coach? Find out next. We've got some details for you. And we'll have much more on the Charles Oakley incident. Who looks worse, Oak or the Knicks? Keep voting on Twitter, and don't miss these guys. They're going to go at it at the desk. It's First Take.
Hey, what's happening, world? It's TIP.